All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep, really deep, into something I think most of us struggle with, at least from time to time.
Definitely, yeah.
Self-sabotage.
It's such a common thing.
Why we get in our own way. And our guide for this journey is going to be Brianna Wiest's book, The Mountain Is You.
It's a really good one.
Yeah. I really enjoyed reading it. And we've really gone through it to pull out, like, what are the core ideas here?
Right.
But really importantly for you listening, what are the actionable things that you can take away from this?
What can you do?
What can you actually do to get unstuck? Like, why are you feeling stuck and how can you actually make a change? So our mission today is simple, to give you the tools to see those self-made obstacles and start to break them down so you can move forward.
Exactly. And you can think of this deep dive as like a shortcut to understanding some really profound concepts about this whole idea of self-sabotage. Now, Wiest uses this really powerful image throughout the book, which is this idea of a mountain. So when we talk about, your mountain, what exactly are we talking about? What are these internal hurdles that she's highlighting?
Okay, so let's unpack this mountain idea, because she's not talking about, external, like Everest-sized problems. She's talking about the internal stuff, the stuff we create for ourselves that stops us from, reaching our potential. But these mountains, they don't just appear out of nowhere, right? They're formed by this pressure, like the pressure of our conflicting inner needs. It's almost, I don't know, like tectonic plates, like grinding up against each other and creating a mountain range. But in this case, it's the push and pull between what you consciously want and then your deeper, often unconscious fears and beliefs. And that's what kind of sculpts those personal challenges. So it's not an external Everest, your mountain. It's more like this hidden valley of all these unresolved fears and beliefs. And that's where we need to start our climb.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating here is just how widespread self-sabotage can be for all of us.
Right.
And it's not always like these dramatic, obvious behaviors. Oftentimes, it's much more subtle, deeply ingrained, what we might even call a maladaptive coping mechanism.
Yeah.
You've developed it over time. It was maybe helpful at one point, maybe a way to avoid something unpleasant. But now it's causing more problems than it's solving.
Exactly. It's like they serve a purpose. These actions, even though they seem counterproductive, they're like a way to temporarily meet a need.
Right.
Like, I need to feel safe. I need to feel comfortable. I need to avoid, vulnerability. But you're not actually dealing with the root of the need. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a deeper wound, and that wound is just festering underneath. And Wiest says these behaviors, they often spring from fears, like fears about yourself, fears about the world that you've held on to for a long time without really examining them. Like, am I smart enough to do this? Am I attractive enough? Am I just going to fail anyway? And these kinds of fears are incredibly powerful drivers of these actions, these self-sabotaging actions that you might not even be fully aware of.
And we can connect this to the bigger picture here. These self-sabotaging behaviors, they very often reflect deeper underlying limited beliefs that you hold about yourself and about what's possible for you.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not just random.
She gives this example that I think is really relatable for a lot of people, of someone who struggles with finances. Like, they can never get ahead. They always seem to mess things up.
Yeah, money problems.
And to really understand what's going on there, you have to kind of go back to the beginning, go back to your earliest ideas about money. What did you learn from your parents or caregivers? How did they handle their finances? And even more importantly, how did they talk about other people who were financially successful or who were, struggling? Like, if you grew up hearing that all wealthy people are greedy or untrustworthy, guess what? Your subconscious might start resisting that, even if consciously you want financial stability.
And this actually raises a really important question that I wanted to ask you about, which is the anxiety that often goes along with self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Why do we feel so anxious when we're, self-sabotaging?
Well, she suggests that anxiety is often a direct reflection of those very limiting beliefs that we just talked about. It's almost like an internal alarm bell going off.
Yeah.
Because your actions or your desires are clashing with this deep-seated idea of who you are and what you believe is possible for you or acceptable for you. It's that mismatch, that tension that creates the anxiety.
And, you often hear this advice. Just love yourself.
Right. Love yourself. Yeah.
Wiest touches on why that isn't always the quick fix that people hope for. And I think it's a really, really important point to understand.
Yeah. And simply trying to plaster on positive affirmations and just affirm everything about yourself, it often doesn't really work in a lasting way. And the reason is, I think deep down there's a recognition that you're not yet living up to your potential, to the person you want to be. And so true peace, she says, comes not from pretending everything's perfect, but from accepting that gap between where you are and where you want to be, and then committing to that journey, like that journey of growth to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's about acknowledging that discrepancy within yourself and not trying to deny it with just superficial positivity.
Right.
And when we do deny it, Wiest says that we often fall into this blame game.
Oh, yeah. This is huge. I think everybody does this, like constantly pointing fingers at everything and everyone else, like my boss, my partner, the economy, bad luck, whatever it is, right?
It's always somebody else's fault.
But it prevents you from taking ownership. And without ownership, you can't really change. If you're always finding reasons outside of yourself to explain why you're unhappy or why you're not achieving your goals, you're not actually empowering yourself to move forward.
And change, real change, lasting transformation often requires a catalyst, something to get it going. And Wiest discusses this idea of hitting a breaking point.
Yeah, I love this idea. It's that moment when the pain of staying the same, of staying stuck where you are, it finally outweighs the fear of the unknown, of stepping into the unknown and making changes. And it's not always like this big Hollywood moment. It's more of an internal shift. But it's basically that moment when you're like, enough is enough. I can't keep doing this anymore.
Yeah, like I'm done with this.
I'm done.
And I think what's a really interesting perspective that Wiest offers is this idea of self-sabotage as outdated skills.
I love this idea. Yeah, because, behaviors that might have been helpful at one point, even necessary for you to navigate life. Like when you were younger, when you were in a different situation, to cope, they actually become obstacles.
As you grow and your circumstances change.
As you grow, like what was once a skill for coping or for surviving, it becomes self-sabotage.
Right. It's no longer serving you.
Yeah. It's not serving you anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's just that we're stuck in those old patterns or we don't even realize that there are other options, that there are healthier, more effective ways of being and doing things.
And as we touched on earlier with the example of money, there are often these deeper reasons why you might cling to these self-sabotaging patterns, even when they seem, completely irrational.
Totally. And people hold on to familiar patterns, even if that reason is, buried deep in their subconscious, like not even aware of it.
Right.
But it's there. And that example we talked about earlier, right? Like wanting more money, but subconsciously believing that wealthy people are bad or self-centered, it highlights this perfectly.
Yeah.
Like that desire for wealth on a deeper level, it might not be genuine because it's clashing with something else, like maybe a need to be liked or to see yourself as a good person. So the self-sabotage in that case, it's actually protecting that belief. It's saying, you know what? I don't really want that money because if I get it, I'm going to become this person that I don't want to be.
And another really common pattern that Wiest addresses is the fresh start mentality as a form of avoidance.
Oh, yes. The allure of the clean slate.
Right.
Like constantly needing to start over. New job, new relationship, new city.
And he's new.
New diet, new.
Okay.
But without actually addressing the core issues that are causing the problems in the first place, that's classic self-sabotage. It's like running away from your problems instead of actually dealing with them.
Exactly. And Wiest encourages you to ask yourself some tough questions when that urge for a fresh start comes up.
Right.
Like, what is it that's actually triggering you? What are your true desires? Not just the surface level wants. And are you rushing into things without really thinking them through?
Right. And I love how she talks about really envisioning the feeling of long-term commitment and growth in one area of your life, like truly planting roots and nurturing them instead of just being ready to pull them up at any moment and run.
Yeah, like really sticking with it and seeing what happens. And the way we interact with the world and the people around us can also be a major contributor to these internal mountains that Wiest talks about.
Yeah.
And she specifically discusses the destructive nature of judgment.
Oh, judging others.
Judging others, yeah.
Which we all do.
We all do.
Yeah. And she makes the point that it's not just about them, it's about us.
Yes.
Because when we judge other people, we're actually creating these rules and limitations for ourselves. Maybe it comes from envy, like, oh, they have something I don't have. Or maybe just a general sense of lack within ourselves. But by setting these really rigid standards for others, we box ourselves in.
Right. We limit ourselves.
Yeah, we create this environment of fear and self-criticism internally. And so the damage that we do to ourselves by judging others, it far outweighs any harm that we're inflicting on the person we're judging.
Yeah, we're really hurting ourselves more than anybody else.
Yes.
And very often these self-sabotaging patterns are deeply intertwined with our sense of self-worth.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
And Wiest explores the really significant role that self-esteem plays in the poor decisions that we sometimes make.
And low self-esteem can be a powerful driver of making bad choices, really, you know?
Right.
Think about someone staying in a relationship that's not working, you know, because being alone feels even worse. Or someone who refuses to take a risk in their career because they're afraid of regret or of judgment, you know, they're afraid of what other people will think. So low self-esteem, it can create this weird comfort zone.
Yeah.
Even though it's not actually comfortable. Even though it's not really comfortable, it's familiar. And stepping outside of that, even for something better, feels way too risky.
Right. And in a world where we're constantly bombarded with so much suffering, some people experience a really difficult emotion when things in their own lives start to go well. And that's, you know, the guilt of success.
Oh, the guilt of success.
Right.
That, like, why me, you know?
Right. Why do I deserve to be happy when all this other stuff is happening in the world?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, why am I allowed to have this when so many other people are struggling? And she stresses the importance of reframing how you think about money and success.
It's a really important point.
Like, it's not just a marker of status. It's a tool. You know, money is a tool. Success is a tool.
Yeah.
And it's a tool that you can use to help others. You can use it to buy time. You can use it to create opportunities to change the world in your own way. So don't see your success as a way to feel superior, you know, which is what can lead to guilt. See it as a way to do good.
Yeah, and fear in its many different forms is a really significant component of self-sabotage.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And Wiest, you know, talks about, you know, in detail about fear. And she specifically calls out this paralyzing fear of failure.
Oh, the fear of failure. You know, that intense fear of messing up, of being judged, of not getting it right the first time. And it can be so overwhelming that it just stops you. You know, you're paralyzed. You don't even try.
Yeah, it's like the fear is just bigger than any potential reward.
Exactly. And then on the flip side of that, we have, you know, you might achieve things, but then you downplay them.
Right.
You're like, oh, it wasn't a big deal.
You minimize your success.
Oh, I just got lucky.
Yeah.
You know, and that tendency to downplay your accomplishments, it comes from a few different places. Like maybe it's the fear of reaching a peak.
Right. And then having to come down.
And then what? You know, you reach the top of the mountain and then what? You can only go down from there. And that can feel really scary. And there's also the anxiety about seeming arrogant, you know? Like, oh, I don't want to brag. I don't want to show off.
So we end up dismissing our achievements.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about personal growth and overcoming self-sabotage, our physical well-being plays a huge role.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. And Wiest, she emphasizes the importance of defining what health actually means on your own terms.
Yes, because these external definitions of, you know, what's healthy, you know, like you have to eat this way, you have to work out this way, you have to have this kind of body. It's often unhelpful because everybody's different. And so she really encourages you to focus on what a healthy lifestyle actually feels like in your body.
Right. What works for you?
What works for you? What can you sustain? What's enjoyable, you know?
And what's sustainable?
And she makes the point that, you know, small, gradual changes are much more effective in the long run than these big, drastic overhauls.
Right. It's those small changes you can stick with that make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. And make it easy on yourself, you know, like set up your environment for success, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe prep some healthy meals in advance or just have a water bottle, you know, handy all the time. Like just make those healthy choices easy.
Yeah, set yourself up for success. And in our busy modern lives, this idea of being constantly occupied, it can actually become its own, like, subtle but powerful form of self-sabotage. And Wiest calls this the busy trap.
The busy trap. It's like, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
You know, look how important I am. I must be important because I'm so busy. But it can also be this excuse, you know, this way to avoid things.
Right. Avoid difficult conversations.
Avoid difficult conversations. Avoid, commitments you don't want to make.
Avoid maybe spending time with certain people.
Even spending time with yourself and really reflecting on what you need. And so she suggests, finding healthier ways to cope with those underlying feelings that are driving that need to be busy. Can you create something instead of just doing tasks? Something you're proud of, something that builds your confidence. Or can you learn to set boundaries, like healthy boundaries in your relationships?
And to break free from these patterns of self-sabotage, Wiest argues that you need to identify your core cravings.
Yeah, what are you really craving?
Like, what are those deep-seated objectives, those longings, the things that are really driving you at your core? And oftentimes, these are subconscious. We're not even really aware of them.
We don't know what they are.
Yeah, and Wiest suggests that you can start to uncover these by really paying attention to the areas of your life that cause the most conflict.
Right, or what motivates you.
What really motivates you.
Like on a deep level, not just the surface stuff.
Right, what are those underlying motivations?
Yeah, and when those core cravings go unmet, Wiest identifies some really common symptoms.
Right, and what are some of the symptoms?
Well, it can manifest in a lot of different ways. Procrastination, developing unhealthy habits, withdrawing from social connections, feeling isolated. Like if a deep craving for you is freedom and autonomy and your life is really structured and controlled, you might find yourself self-sabotaging opportunities that could lead to more freedom. And you might feel just completely unmotivated, even when you should be happy, But it's because those core needs aren't being met.
So understanding the why behind your self-sabotage is a crucial step. But Wiest emphasizes that, intellectually understanding it is very different from stopping it.
You got to do something.
Right. You got to take action.
Knowledge is not power. It's applied knowledge that's power. You got to do something with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And overcoming self-sabotage, it requires action. It requires you to actually do something about your desires, about your unmet needs. Even if it feels really uncomfortable, even if it's emotionally triggering, you've got to step outside of that comfort zone, even if it feels familiar.
Yeah, because that discomfort, that's where the growth is.
Yeah.
And as you begin to make those changes, you're likely to encounter resistance.
Resistance. Yeah. That internal pushback.
That pushback against doing things differently.
Yeah.
So how does Wiest suggest you navigate that resistance when it comes up?
Well, she says don't try to just power through it.
Right.
Don't just try to white knuckle it. Instead, she says, ask yourself some questions like, why am I feeling this way? What is this feeling trying to tell me?
Yeah, what's underneath that feel?
What needs aren't being met? What do I need to learn from this? And then she says, it's really helpful to reconnect with your vision. Like your vision for a better life when your motivation is driven by something positive, by something you're moving toward, the resistance tends to diminish.
Yeah. And our emotions play a huge role in this whole process of self-sabotage and overcoming it.
Of course. And
Wiest really dives deep into the importance of understanding and processing difficult emotions. And she starts with anger.
Anger, yeah.
Which is often seen as a negative emotion.
Oh, you can't be angry.
You're not supposed to be angry.
Right.
But Wiest says, anger is a natural response.
Yeah.
It's a healthy response when your needs haven't been met or your boundaries have been violated. It's not a bad emotion. And she actually suggests that it can be a really powerful catalyst for change.
Yeah.
It can motivate you to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
To create healthier boundaries.
To get what you need.
Yeah. And then she talks about sadness.
Sadness.
Which is another emotion that we often try to avoid.
Oh, nobody wants to be sad.
Right.
But, she makes the point that sadness is a normal reaction to loss.
Right.
And loss can be, a lot of different things.
It can be a person. It can be a job.
It can be a relationship. It can be a dream. It can be an expectation,
Right.
And the problem is when you resist it, sadness doesn't just go away if you ignore it. It comes in waves. And there's no shame in crying, in feeling down, in missing what you've lost.
Right. It's part of being human.
It's part of being human.
And then she delves into the more challenging emotional territory, which is, embarrassment and shame.
Oh, those are tough ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Embarrassment is that, temporary feeling of awkwardness.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But shame is much deeper. Shame is this belief that you are fundamentally flawed.
Like you're broken somehow.
Right. That you're not good enough. And Wiest warns that unprocessed shame, it can be incredibly destructive in your life. It can fuel all sorts of self-sabotaging behaviors.
Because you're trying to cope with this underlying sense that you're not worthy, you're not good enough.
Right. And another emotion that can often mask deeper feelings is jealousy.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
And she describes jealousy as kind of a disguised emotion. Like what might look like anger or criticism towards someone else is actually rooted in sadness and dissatisfaction with your own life.
Right.
It's not really about them, it's about you. And what's so interesting is that paying attention to who and what you're jealous of, it can actually be a really helpful way to figure out what you truly want.
Yeah. It can show you what you're missing in your own life.
Absolutely.
And we all have that voice in our heads, that inner critic that can be so harsh and critical.
Yeah, the inner critic.
And Wiest really addresses that as a form of self-sabotage.
Oh, absolutely. That constant negative self-talk, the judgment, it's often rooted in fear, fear of judgment from others. Like you're preemptively putting yourself down before anyone else can.
Right. It's like you're trying to protect yourself.
Exactly. But she emphasizes that being kind to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
being compassionate to yourself, it doesn't make you weak.
No.
It actually makes you stronger. It builds resilience.
And it makes you less susceptible to that external criticism.
Yeah, because you're not as afraid of it anymore.
Right. And in navigating our complex inner world, it's so crucial to be able to distinguish between, the helpful inner guidance and just fear.
Right.
Right. So how do we tell the difference between intuition and fear?
Well, she says, intuition is usually this quiet, calm knowing, like a subtle sense of clarity. It's not loud and anxious like fear.
Right. So it's different from that.
Yeah, it's different from that. And so when you're trying to figure out, is this intuition or is this fear? Ask yourself, is this based on the present moment?
Right.
Or is it based on all these what ifs about the future?
Like, what if this happens? What if that happens?
Exactly. And intuition often has this sense of calm reassurance. Whereas fear, it's more agitated, it's more urgent.
It's that uneasy feeling.
Yeah.
Right. But even when you do identify something as intuition, Wiest offers a word of caution.
Right.
About treating it like it's, a prophecy.
Right. Don't treat it like it's a crystal ball.
Right.
Predicting the future.
Feelings don't always dictate the right decision.
No.
Right. And in fact, Wiest argues that making right decisions, those aligned with your values, they're actually what create positive feelings over time. So it's not about just following every impulse.
Right.
Right? You still need to think things through. You still need to use your rational mind.
You've got to use your brain.
Right. And intuition about, other people or future events, it's not some magical prediction mechanism.
Yeah.
It develops through your experiences.
Right. It's not like you just suddenly know everything.
Right. It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process. It's about paying attention.
And the pursuit of pleasure,
Oh, yeah.
that immediate gratification.
Oh, instant gratification.
This can also lead to self-sabotage.
Absolutely.
Right. And Wiest, she talks about this phenomenon she calls the dopamine trap.
The dopamine's right.
And dopamine is often, mistakenly called the happiness molecule.
Right.
But it's more accurately the more molecule.
Right. I want more.
Right. It drives that pursuit of pleasure, of novelty, of the next reward. And Wiest explains that, after you achieve a goal, after you get that dopamine hit, it fades, and then you're left wanting more.
Yeah.
And you're constantly seeking that next high. And this can lead to subconsciously sabotaging, desired outcomes. Like you're almost afraid of achieving them because then what?
Right, because then it's like the chase is over.
The chase is over.
Yeah.
And she points out that long-term unmet desires, they can even create a negative association with actually achieving them. Like it's almost like you're afraid of getting what you want because you've wanted it for so long and it hasn't happened, that it must be bad.
Right. There must be something wrong with it. If it were good, I would have gotten it by now.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And so it seems that even positive change, even achieving our goals, it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's weird.
Right.
But it's true.
So why is that? Why do we feel uncomfortable when good things happen.
Well, our brains are wired for familiarity,
Right.
for stability. And so even positive change, even the things you want, they disrupt that.
They shake things up.
It shakes things up. And so it can feel unsettling. And unfortunately, that can lead to self-sabotage because your subconscious is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Get back to what's familiar. Get back to what's predictable, even if it's not good for you.
Right. It's that pull back to the known.
Yeah. And so overcoming that takes a conscious effort.
Right.
To adapt to this new normal, to realize that, this discomfort is not necessarily a sign that you're on the wrong path, but it's just part of the growth process.
Yeah. And this underlying resistance to change that we're talking about, it's really rooted in the subconscious mind.
The subconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's powerful.
It's incredibly powerful.
And it's constantly working to reinforce those familiar thoughts and feelings and impulses. It's filtering information.
It's a confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's trying to confirm what it already believes.
Right.
And so Wiest emphasizes that true healing, lasting change, it requires your whole system to adapt.
Right. Not just your mind, but your body as well.
Yeah, it's a physical process as well, and that's why it takes time.
Yeah, it takes time for your whole system to recalibrate.
Absolutely.
But despite all these challenges, Wiest, she offers a hopeful perspective on the resilience of the human mind.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Our ability to grow and adapt.
We're not fragile,
No, we're not fragile.
We're actually anti-fragile. Like, we get stronger through these challenges.
Right. And she even suggests that the brain sometimes creates problems for itself when there aren't any.
Right. Like, it needs something to work on.
Right. It's almost like an internal workout.